Some 1970s albums showed up, shrugged at radio formats, and walked straight to the cutout bin. They never moved the units their labels prayed for, yet the grooves still whisper, "Listen closely," to anyone who digs past the gold records. Here are 13 flops that aged into essentials. Number 1 record, Big Star, 1972.
Rock and roll is here to stay.
Alex Chilton and Chris Bell wrapped the masters at Arden Studios in Memphis on the 30th of April, 1972, stacking jangling Rickenbacker parts over Andy Hummel's Rickenbacker bass, until engineer John Fry's VU meters tapped red. Arden's new distribution deal with Stax should have put the LP on every Sears rack. But Stax switched pressing plants that summer, and half the first run, about 5,000 copies, never reached stores outside the Southeast. Billboard ran a 3-star spotlight in August 1972. The album still missed the Billboard 200 entirely, moving an estimated 10,000 U.S. units that year.
Ain't no one going to turn me around.
Cleveland's WMMS and Boston's WBCN spun 13 and The Ballad of El Gudo in late-night slots, prompting college kids to mail-order the record directly from Arden for $3.98 plus postage. By 1980, power pop bands from Athens to Minneapolis were covering In the Street, and Rolling Stone slotted number 1 record at 192 on its 500 greatest albums list. Sweet, but late consolation for an LP that had already fallen out of print twice. Number 2, New York Dolls. New York Dolls, 1973.
All about that personality, you got it while it was hot.
Mercury booked the Dolls into Record Plant New York City in April 1973, pairing them with producer Todd Rundgren, who reportedly greeted the band with "Let's cut the chatter and roll tape." David Johansen tracked vocals in silver platform boots. Johnny Thunders played a white Les Paul, tuned almost half a step flat because no one could find fresh strings at 3 a.m.
And I'm looking for a kiss.
Rundgren mixed the album in 2 days, boosting Jerry Nolan's snare to a crack that startled label execs used to Bachman-Turner Overdrive. Released on the 27th of July, 1973, the LP peaked at number 116 on the Billboard 200 and sold roughly 40,000 U.S. copies. Mercury had printed 6 times that. Cleveland, Detroit, and San Francisco FM stations loved Personality Crisis, but mainstream AM programmers balked at lipstick and Stack Hill promo photos. UK Music Weeklies raved. Melody Maker called the set trash with flash, yet it stalled at number 38 on the UK chart. Within 3 years, you could trace half of CBGB's set lists, Ramones, Television, Blondie, back to these 11 tracks. But in 1973, the Dolls were left holding unsold posters and a tour van that broke down in Iowa 2 days into the Midwest leg. Number 3, Raw Power, The Stooges, 1973. Iggy Pop flew into London with no working band, signed a new deal with CBS on David Bowie's recommendation, and rebuilt the Stooges at Olympic Studios in September 1972. James Williamson arrived first, lugging a Les Paul Custom and a fuzz pedal handmade by Detroit radio engineer Russ Gibb. Brothers Ron and Scott Ashton switched to bass and drums 3 days before the red light went on. Williamson's guitar bled into every mic, forcing Olympics Keith Harwood to hang blankets over metal stands, a fix that melted when the room hit 100 degrees Fahrenheit and soaked the floor with dye. Iggy cut vocals shirtless, high on English cold tablets, shouting into an SM-58 cosseted in a lady's silk stocking to tame spit. The band mixed themselves on the 30th of October, while Bowie, booked as executive producer, was stuck at the Old Grey Whistle test. CBS pressed 30,000 U.S. copies for the February 1973 release, but spent the promo budget on Bruce Springsteen's Greetings instead. Radio censored Shake Appeal, chain stores refused the sleeve with Iggy's leather crotch front and center, and the album peaked at number 182 on Billboard for a single week. UK fans bought enough imports to push a belated domestic issue to number 36 in July, yet Columbia's sales office logged fewer than 50,000 worldwide by year-end. Fast forward, Kurt Cobain listed Raw Power at number 1 in his 1993 Top 50 diary, and CBS's 1997 SoundScan bump finally nudged lifetime U.S. shipments over 200,000, 2 decades late. But the blown speaker mix never needed a remaster to sound dangerous. Number 4, Brain Capers, Mott the Hoople, 1971. Mott cut album 4 at Island's Basing Street studio, July 1971, with Guy Stevens pacing the live room in a crash helmet, hurling cabbages at the Hammond B3 to keep energy high. Ian Hunter tracked rhythm guitar on a cheap Baldwin, strings 2 months old, because Stevens said fresh strings were for bank managers. The Storm Sound intro on Death May Be Your Santa Claus is actually a half-inch tape loop of Stevens shaking a baking tray and slapping it against the echo chamber door.
It's gotta start back in your own backyard.
Island shipped 3,000 promo LPs on the 19th of November 1971, wrapped in a black throwaway sleeve stamped Super Bargain Bin Bonanza. The label's UK distributor mixed up cartons, sending stock meant for Nottingham into classical-only Woolworths in Kent. Record Retailer registered a 1-week appearance at number 41. The set never reached Billboard's Top 200, and U.S. copies were cut out binned by spring at $1.29. Mott's van caught fire outside Newcastle on the release tour, melting half the unsold merchandise. The burnt vinyl smell followed them into every club and may explain the sparse turnout. Leeds Town Hall clocked 173 paid on a 2,000-seat floor. When Bowie handed them all the young dudes 8 months later, Columbia repressed Brain Capers on the cheap, but dropped the original gatefold, making those first misshipped UK sleeves the priciest item in Mott collecting next to Hunter's shattered Browning Gibson. Number 5, Marquee Moon, Television, 1977. Elektra A&R man Tom Ciccone signed Television out of CBGB for a $60,000 advance, then spent 3 weeks watching Tom Verlaine and Richard Lloyd argue over who would play which harmony note. Sessions ran the 14th through the 30th of September 1976 in A&R Studio A on West 48th Street. Engineer Andy Johns let the band set up live. Verlaine's Fender Jazzmaster facing Lloyd's Strat across the ISO line, so the guitars talked. Johns tracked 8 tunes to 16-track Ampex at 15 IPS with no compression. Verlaine mixed on JBL 4311s, turned so low Johns wore headphones to hear the cymbals. Elektra pressed 80,000 LPs and released the record on the 8th of February 1977 with a 4-line ad budget. New York's Village Voice ran the only Metro insert. Billboard 200 peak, number 199 for 1 week. The 19th of March 1977, roughly 17,000 U.S. units. Most stores quietly cut the price within weeks, and promo reps flagged the album as a dead end by spring. Even at CBGB, most of the regulars passed it over for Ramones or Blondie. Outside of a few college DJs, almost no one in the U.S. knew it existed.
I see no evil.
Across the Atlantic, though, the story was different. John Peel premiered the title track in full. Marquee Moon reached number 28 on the UK albums list and racked 60,000 sales by summer, outselling the US 10-1. British critics loved it immediately. Melody Maker and NME called it a masterpiece. But in America, it flopped hard and vanished into the cutout bins almost as fast as it arrived. CMJ's 1978 Reader poll named it Best Guitar Record to clear a party. And a young Michael Stipe told the Athens Daily News he learned chord voicings by slowing the LP to 16 RPM, proving the best lessons were buried under the clearance stickers. Number 6, Indiscreet, Sparks, 1975.
Get in the swing, pal, get in the swing with every.
Ron and Russell Mael came off 2 UK top 10 hits and decided their next statement needed French horns. Island paired them with Tony Visconti at Trident, July 1975. Visconti brought in a 35-piece orchestra, triple-tracked clarinets, and wrote a tuba line that made bassist Ian Hampton redundant on Get in the Swing. Ron's RMI Electra piano drove the basic tracks. Visconti ran it through an eventide phaser he just used on Bowie's Fame. The album shipped the 10th of October 1975 in a gatefold, showing a smashed biplane. Island expected another gold disc, pressed 150,000 UK units. The first week chart, number 18 UK, then a fast slide as punk fanzines called the record Music Hall on Sugar. US issue hit in December in a trimmed single sleeve. Billboard 200 peak stalled below the bubbling under zone. Under 20,000 domestic copies. Singles Get in the Swing and Looks reached UK numbers 27 and 26, but US radio programmers claimed not enough guitars. A counting memo from Island dated January 1976 lists indiscreet returns at 64,000. Warehouse forklifts wore more scratches on the vinyl than some turntables ever would. Number 7, Wish You Were Here, Badfinger, 1974.
You always played the fool.
Pete Ham and company escaped Apple's bookkeeping drama only to land at Caribou Ranch, Nederland, Colorado in April 1974 under producer Chris Thomas. Elevation 8,600 feet meant thinner air. Engineer Keith Harwood clocked Joey Milan's Les Paul a half step sharp until someone remembered to retune between takes. Ham tracked Meanwhile back at the ranch on a Rhodes rented from Elton John's Road Locker. Thomas mixed it through Caribou's brand new Harrison 3232 console, then added 3 layers of Mellotron strings because Colorado felt orchestral. Warner Brothers shipped 150,000 LPs on the 15th of November 1974 with 0 advance single. Promotion boss Stan Cornyn joked the cover's empty theater sold the album's future a bit too accurately.
Only you can comfort me.
2 weeks later, Warner's publishing arm sued Badfinger's manager for missing escrow funds, yanked the record on the 31st of December, and instructed stores to return unsold stock. Chart time, 7 weeks. Billboard peak, number 148 on the 11th of January 1975, roughly 32,000 U.S. scans. East Coast FM jocks still loved Dennis, but fans chasing the LP found only cut corner returns at Sam Goody for $1.99. A U.S. tour got as far as the Agora Ballroom in Cleveland, attendance 420 in a 600-seat room, before management pulled the plug to meet lawyers. When Warner quietly reissued the record in 1980, collectors had already bid open shrink-wrap first pressings past $50, a tidy premium that never reached the band's ledger. Number 8, Secret Treaties, Blue Oyster Cult, 1974. The OC settled into Columbia Studio C, New York, October 1973. Producer team Murray Krugman and Sandy Pearlman policing overdubs like air traffic controllers. Donald Buck Dharma Rosser tracked his black SG through a 100-watt Marshall Major hot enough to trip Con Edison breakers once. Pearlman labeled the fuse box Godzilla Deterrent. Patti Smith faxed in early lyrics for Career of Evil from CBGB's payphone. Handwriting too messy to decipher the word evil, so the band sang Eagle in the roughs. Final mixes wrapped in January 1974. Columbia pressed 250,000 copies and led with an ad that promised Air Supremacy guitars. Release date, the 1st of April 1974. Billboard 200 peak, number 53 on the 22nd of June after 11 weeks climb. About 190,000 U.S. units. Respectable but shy of label hopes. The record never broke the UK Top 40, though Manchester's Piccadilly Radio flogged ME262 so often Lufthansa complained about reputation damage. Critics raved, Circus called it heavy metal chamber music. Cream mailed a tongue-in-cheek invoice for Blown-House speakers. Live, the songs landed harder. The band opened for Black Sabbath at Chicago's International Amphitheater on the 20th of July 1974 and sold more Secret Treaties t-shirts than actual LPs that night. Columbia finally certified the album gold in October 1992 after catalog orders tipped lifetime U.S. sales past 500,000. An 18-year crawl that gave the title's clandestine vibe unintended accuracy. Number 9, Phenomenon, UFO 1974.
Doctor, please.
UFO landed in Morgan Studios, London on the 5th of January 1974, with 18-year-old Michael Schenker freshly poached from Scorpions and producer Ron Nevison eager to sculpt something leaner than the band's earlier space rock jams. Schenker's white flying V ran into a 50-watt plexi, dimed so loud Nevison patched the guitar cab into the studio toilet for isolation. The solo on Dr. Doctor bled through the tile anyway. Phil Mogg cut vocals in a single day after contracting laryngitis from an English winter. Nevison kept the croak, calling it instant menace.
Rock bottom, rock bottom, rock bottom.
Chrysalis pressed 40,000 UK copies for the 7th of May 1974 release, shipped 20,000 to the United States, and booked a cash-strapped support slot on Jethro Tull's summer run. Billboard filed the set under FM Action, but it never cracked the top 200. Chrysalis estimates put first-year U.S. sales near 25,000, about a tenth of what the label spent on tour buses. Rock Bottom still earned heavy late-night spins on KSHE 95 St. Louis and WMMS Cleveland. And Eddie Van Halen later told Guitar World he borrowed its descending break for Mean Street. The LP crawled to UK number 50, disappeared, then came back as a catalog steady seller after Strangers in the Night blew up in 1979. By 1995, Phenomenon had rolled past the 500,000 mark worldwide. A slow burn payback for that bathroom cab take. Number 10, Fighting, Thin Lizzy 1975.
Oh, sure you're a wild one.
Fresh off the subdued nightlife, Phil Lynott wanted muscle. Then Lizzy decamped to the Who's Ramport Studios, Battersea, on the 21st of April 1975, bringing new dual lead team Scott Gorham and Brian Robertson. Producer Nick Tauber parked the guitar amps in opposing corners, asked both players to improvise harmonies on the fly, and captured the now signature twin lead sound on Wild One and Suicide. Lynott recorded guide vocals with a head cold, then refused to redo them, arguing the roughness fit the album title.
Nobody cares, nobody cries. Don't that make you feel sad?
Vertigo issued the record in the UK on the 12th of September 1975 with an initial run of 60,000. It peaked at number 60, 3 weeks on chart. US release followed via Mercury on the 15th of October, but radio fixated on Lynyrd Skynyrd and Kiss that fall. Fighting sold roughly 30,000 American units, just enough to keep Mercury interested for one more shot. That shot was Jailbreak 6 months later. Built on the exact twin guitar blueprint road-tested here. Fans who bought early got a mispressed label crediting drummer Brian Downey with lead bagpipes on Freedom Song. Those copies now trade among collectors for 4 times the price of a mint Jailbreak. A small consolation for an album that swung hard, yet landed light on the 1975 sales charts. Number 11, Happy the Man. Happy the Man, 1977. Clive Davis saw the Washington, D.C. quintet in a Georgetown basement, signed them on the spot, and flew everyone to A&M Studio D, Hollywood on the 12th of December, 1976. Producer Ken Scott set Kit Watkins' Mini Moog on a riser, ran Stanley Whitaker's Gibson SG direct through a Roland Space Echo, and recorded drummer Ron Riddle's Simmons pads and acoustic kit simultaneously. 78 tracks on the Studer, a label accountant's nightmare. The finished LP held 7 instrumentals and 1 9-minute vocal. Hardly AM fare. Arista pressed 50,000 copies for the 14th of August 1977 release, mailed promo singles of the 4-minute Knee-Bitten Nymphs in Limbo, radio edited the title to Knee-Bitten, and watched the album stall at 179 on Billboard's 200. Tour support covered a 17-date East Coast loop. Attendance peaked at 412 bodies in Boston, where half the audience comprised Berklee students sketching Watkins' pedal layout. By fiscal year end, Arista's internal memo called the record critically admired, commercially invisible. 46 years later, prog festivals still book reunion slots. but original vinyl with the embossed logo tops 150 on Discogs, more than the entire band's 1977 Road Per Diem. Number 12, Pawn Hearts, Van der Graaf Generator, 1971. Peter Hamill, Guy Evans and Company entered Trident Studios Soho on the 4th of July, 1971, lugging Hammond, Farfisa, Mellotron, and David Jackson's twin tenor saxes. Producer John Anthony routed Hamill's Honor Pianette through a borrowed VCS-3 synth to make the intro of Lemmings wobble like a ship bulkhead. Robert Fripp dropped by on the 13th of July, plugged his Les Paul into an EMS fuzzbox, and recorded 2 takes for Man Erg. Tape op David Henschel left the fader wide so Fripp's sustain still hangs in the control room air on playback reels. Charisma shipped UK stock on the 5th of October 1971. 10,000 gatefolds with a lyric sheet dense enough to resemble a math textbook. Chart action at home, number 23 for 1 week, then gone. Italian distributor Phonogram, however, pressed 30,000 units, and Pawn Hearts hit number 1 there for 6 straight weeks. Band members arrived to find local promoters booking hockey arenas and fans chanting Hamill's name like a football striker. U.S. plans fizzled when Charisma's deal with Buddha expired, leaving import bins the only source. Rolling Stone's Lester Bangs imported his copy, praised the skronk organ apocalypse, and still couldn't scare up domestic stock. Total U.S. sales for 1971? Fewer than 5,000, or roughly the same number of times Hamill sings the word alone on Sidelong Closer, A Plague of Lighthouse Keepers. Number 13, Red, King Crimson, 1974. Robert Fripp disbanded the touring sextet, kept only John Wetton and Bill Bruford, and booked Olympic Studios, Barnes, on the 8th of July, 1974. Wetton's precision bass ran through a dimed Ampeg SVT. Bruford taped gaffer strips across tom heads for the dry punch in One More Red Nightmare. Fripp layered 5 Gibson Les Paul tracks, all through an MXR Phase 90 set slow enough to shimmer but never seasick. Guests dropped in. David Cross bowed electric violin on Providence. Mel Collins overdubbed baritone sax that rattled the studio radiator at 40 hertz. Final mixes wrapped the 25th of August with engineer George Shakintz riding the Fairchild limiter until the needle pinned. Island released UK copies on the 6th of October 1974. Atlantic followed in the US on the 18th of October. Chart peaks, number 45 in the UK, number 66 on Billboard. About 45,000 American sales before Atlantic downgraded it to catalog. No tour promoted the record. Fripp dissolved the band 2 weeks after mastering, sending promoters scrambling to cancel a planned Madison Square Garden date with 3,000 advance tickets sold. Musicians noticed anyway. Dave Grohl cites the title track's polyrhythms as the math lesson nobody warned him about, and Tool borrowed its dropped B riffing for Half Anema. 30th anniversary sales finally nudged Red to silver status in the UK, a slow climb for a record that starts like falling steel beams. Those are the misses that deserved better. Spin One Loud, and the Return to Sender label feels like a collector's sticker instead of a warning. Which overlooked LP do you drag out when the classics feel too safe? Drop the title and maybe it graduates from Bargain Bin Ghost to next year's revival tour.